We're Human Rights International. We educate, empower, and raise awareness on your rights that are human rights.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mahnoor. Welcome to Human Rights International's third podcast on sports and human rights.
Hi guys, my name is Maddy.
Hi everyone, I'm Aadya.
So, do you guys play sports or watch any sports?
Recently I've been playing. I love playing basketball. I'm a huge Boston Celtics fan, and I watch a lot of. Obviously, I watch the Olympics when it comes on, and I watch rugby and Formula One with my family. But yeah, I like a good little sports watching.
That's cool. Maddie, we should play a game of basketball after.
Bring it on! I'm ready.
I also like watching football, cricket, and tennis.
I love watching sports as well. I think it's just such an exciting time. So, I believe everyone here has some knowledge on sports. But in reality, how do sports and human rights interlink?
Naturally, sports are played by people like us, and those people, despite being athletes and undergoing vigorous training, also have rights. Human rights allow athletes to be treated fairly during their training, during competitions, and after competing. However, human rights also defends the symbolism associated with sporting and encourages fair play by outlining consequences.
Exactly that. Like, rarely does a topic engage people in such a passionate way as sports. Sports are among the most anticipated and keenly followed events in the world. Even away from the spotlight, sports can play a significant role in day to day life of anyone who follows, plays, or competes in one way or the other. Sports like moves the heart and minds of millions, even billions, and sports and human rights are intrinsically linked. And there are also very harsh realities regarding to sports and athletes.
Let's begin by discussing fair play. Can either of you elaborate on what you meant by fair play in sport?
So, fair play is linked to sportsmanship. Athletes respecting sport and their competitors is a part of sportsmanship. An example where an athlete does not display sportsmanship is the use of drugs, specifically performance enhancing drugs that enhance their performance,
So what
giving them an unfair advantage over other people.
so what preventative measures, if any, have sporting authorities taken to tackle this?
So, countries like Australia have adopted the World Anti-Doping Agency Code 2003 in 2005 after pressure from the Federal Association on the Australian Football League. Governing bodies have also implemented policies to ensure drug use is eliminated. Such legislation and policies would not have to be implemented if athletes did not feel the need to take drugs to increase their chances of winning or performing well.
Like, one of the reasons athletes take these drugs is because they feel so pressured to do well, not for themselves but also for their countries. That this has a severe negative impact on their mental health. Not only is the mental health of players and athletes impacted, but also the mental health of families, workers, and the audiences. There's an apparent when you look at sports, there is an apparent separation of many sports between masculine and feminine sports, and the players are easily criticized in the field opposite to the sex that they have. So, like, men in ice skating are a lot more criticized than a female in ice skating, as well as women playing football and other sports. There's always these criticisms and discrimination that they face on top of that pressure in the sports. One point which should be expressed is that, which Aadya has mentioned earlier, that they have very little break because they have to maintain that top physique, and that constant pressure can become too much on their mental health. One example is Simone Biles, who at like the Olympics pulled out due to mental health concerns, which is the right thing to do. And she received a lot of support, but also a lot of criticism and abuse.
Sadly, there is more to this than meets the eye. Mental health of players, their families, and audiences are impacted by a variety of factors, including sexism, as Maddie has just mentioned. For example, players of the England's football team face a lot of racist abuse on social media after they lost the game at the Euros final this summer. A mural honouring Marcus Rashford was also destroyed in Manchester following the game. Whilst impacting the players' mental health, it also has adverse effects on their families and audiences. People like us who live in a multicultural society were somewhat afraid as to what these hateful actions really meant. These players are a part of England regardless of whether they win or lose. And I think that's the point that we're trying to emphasize, that we are one regardless of our race, our colour, our background. And frankly, sports should not instigate racism and hate as it is meant to bring people together.
That is very true. We also often forget that there are people setting up the stadiums for competitions, communities that face abuse throughout the games, and families who suffer post game. This means not only is their mental health not cared for, but many other basic human rights are also undermined.
Yeah, exactly. The governing bodies engage in these commercial activities and therefore should be following the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. However, in June 2019, like World Athletics said, it is not a public authority exercising state power, but rather a private body exercising private contractual powers. Therefore, it's not subject to human rights instruments such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or the European Convention of Human Rights.
I'd still like to believe that such sport governing bodies have a responsibility to avoid infringing on people's human rights through their activities, and they should address the consequences that occur as a result of their business activities. This includes taking remedial measures if businesses, policies, or practices contribute to negative impacts throughout their value chain. So they all need to take measures to engage with the affected people and not ignore them. People who are affected by their policies and practices to ensure no human rights harms are taking place. Incidents such as harassment and sexual abuse should not be occurring at all, but the harsh reality is that they do occur, but it's how we tackle them that makes the difference. For example, that the abuse faced by the United States women's national gymnastics team by their own team doctor, Larry Nassar, is an awful incident. I'm sure many such incidents continue to happen throughout the world to athletes, regardless of their gender or race.
I am sure such incidents still do occur. I believe there should be an administrative body that should be established for different leagues, such as the NFL, which monitors and takes complaints regarding violence, harassment, racism, and other human rights issues, all of which affect the mental health of all the players. Besides that, I feel players, coaches, the administrative staff should all be held responsible on and off the field for their activities, which may violate somebody else's human rights.
Sports are obviously competitive in nature. However, what people do need to realize is that in competitions, one team always wins and one team always loses. Sometimes the fans, especially now because of social media and globalization, send so much hate to the players, which can be very damaging for the players and their families. This needs to be eradicated completely. Criticism is good and should always be welcomed. However, there's a difference between constructive criticism and just abuse and bullying.
You're right. You're certainly right, Maddie. But like things such as the death threats cannot be perceived as constructive criticism. These death threats that are sent to players and their families can damage the mental health of the family and just impact their overall lifestyle in general. It can create extremely scary situations, leading to depression and anxiety. It's more of a counterproductive measure than anything else.
I'm very glad that we chose this topic to discuss this week and we're having this conversation. I believe it's such a much needed dialogue that needs to happen. We associate toughness with sports and athletes without realizing that they are humans in the end as well. They have human rights which need to be honored. Their physical and mental health needs to be looked after as well.
I feel like we talk about sports and human rights, that there is this butterfly effect with it because people are so invested into the sports, that mental health, racism, sexism goes outside of the sports, which should have never happened in the beginning. And I agree with Adia when she says that any form of abuse, bullying, or death threats is inexcusable, and that this shouldn't be undermined. This shouldn't be ignored or overlooked because it's a fun game to play. Sports plays a huge role in society and the culture of it.
It truly is eye-opening and definitely needs to be talked about more. This discussion has definitely made me more informed about the issues and the human rights violations that occur in sports. I love playing sports, but I've never really thought about the human rights violations that athletes, professionals face in their day to day lives. And I know that our listeners will also agree. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Human Rights International's third podcast on sports and human rights. Please leave any questions or comments down below, and they'll be Thank you, Maddie and Manhur.
Thank you, guys. Bye. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.